Hi all, happy today, whatever that day may be. I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today I'll highlight what I think are the best RPGs and narrative games that are discounted as part of the Steam Summer Sale. As a note, these are my personal favorites, games I have actually played and enjoyed, so if there are any of your favorite RPGs missing from this list that are on sale, do feel free to mention them in the comments below. I'm sure people will be happy to hear about more deals, and you may inspire someone to try out your favorite game. Who knows? It may even become one of their favorites. The Steam Summer Sale is one of the two biggest sales on Steam together with the Winter Sale, so I always look at the games and DLCs on my wishlist during these sales to see if I can get something for a really good deal. There's quite a large number of games on my list, so hopefully there's something here that you haven't played yet and are interested in trying out. I'm arranging the games alphabetically, but if they're from the same series, then they are ordered chronologically. Figured that was the easiest way to sort them since they're kind of an eclectic mix, even if they are all RPGs and narrative-focused games. Timestamps are in the description, feel free to move around with them however you like. First on the list just so happens to be my all-time favorite game, Dragon Age Origins. It's only €3. However, unless you really only use Steam and don't play games on other platforms, I recommend buying DAO on the GOG store because of GOG's game preservation program already having the 4GB patch installed when you install the game. That way you don't have to struggle with installing patches. You may still have to adjust a couple of settings in the shortcuts properties, such as running in compatibility mode, but it works far better out of the box than the Steam version. I do have a guide on how to install the 4GB or LLA patch for Dragon Age Origins, but even so, some people still struggle with it, so that's why I recommend getting the GOG version. If you don't know what Dragon Age Origins is all about, it's a party-based RPG where you control your main character and a group of up to 3 companions as you engage in fairly tactical, real-time with pause combat. The real draw of the game, however, isn't the combat, but the world building, characters, and story. It has some of the best fantasy world building I've ever seen in a game, very compelling for the purpose of making the player care about what's going on. Dragon Age Inquisition is next, available for €4. This is my second favorite Dragon Age out of the trilogy, not nearly as good as Origins, but still a very enjoyable DA game. Still feels like Dragon Age for the most part and has some very cool areas to explore, interesting characters. The main story is unfortunately a bit hollow because the writers had to cut a few of the main quests because of budget reasons, but even so it still has a lot of strong narrative moments and it's beloved by many for good reason. I personally think both the story and the combat are worse in Inquisition than Origins, but your mileage may vary. For such a low price of €4, I do think it's absolutely worth getting if you haven't played it before and enjoy a solid fantasy RPG. Drova Forsaken Kin is an indie gothic-like RPG that got pretty popular in this niche, and it's on sale for €17.50. It's 2D pixel art instead of 3D, but it is really good in terms of the gothic-like experience it provides. I played through it myself and enjoyed it a lot. Even if I'm not the most skilled player, I still made do, usually by getting NPCs to help me against more difficult enemies. I personally couldn't play the original Gothic 1 and 2 because the controls in camera were too janky, but I do enjoy Gothic-like games such as Risen, a later title from the developers of Gothic, and of course the Gothic 1 remake, which I haven't yet finished, but has been a blast so far, and more indie games like Drova. I would have loved to include the Gothic 1 remake on this list, but unfortunately it released very recently and had a small discount on release, so it wasn't able to join the summer sale. It's still pretty expensive, so if you want to wait until the winter sale to get it, I completely understand. However, if you are a huge fan of these kinds of games with a difficult progression in the early game that really makes you work for it, makes you feel weak early, and makes it feel like each enemy is potentially lethal, then you may want to get it even if it's expensive, if you can afford it. If you can't, then Drova Forsaken Kin has a great story and nails the Gothic progression system, so you can get this for a far lower price. Normally it's €25. I would have personally expected a bigger discount by now, but Drova does offer very high quality gameplay and story, so it is worth the money. If you want a cheaper Gothic-like game, stick around for Risen later in this list. Moving on, the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind is on sale for €6. This is my favorite Elder Scrolls game in terms of atmosphere and gameplay, and even the visuals because the art style is very interesting and makes the world feel quite alien. You do really feel like an outsider as you explore Vardenfell. Yes, it is a fairly old game with old graphics and perhaps an outdated combat system that relies on attack rolls, which is not super intuitive, especially if you play in first person and it feels like your attacks should hit. Personally, I never had a problem with Morrowind's combat system. It's as easy as using the weapon type that you have the highest skill in, and you'll be fine. And you can of course always train skills at trainer NPCs as well to get better at a certain weapon type or magic school if you want to use that more. I have a beginner's guide and a list of the best pre-made classes for Morrowind if you feel a bit intimidated by the game and making your own class. For €6, Morrowind is absolutely worth getting. It's one of the best RPGs of all time, and I really do recommend trying it out, even if it may be a little bit weird at first if you're not used to older games. Even if you end up not being able to enjoy the gameplay, there is a fan-made remake in the Skyrim engine called Skywind, which will release either at the end of this year or maybe sometime next year. That one will be far more accessible to players who are used to the way Skyrim and Oblivion work in terms of combat, but will also have a lot of the extra things that Morrowind had, such as mark and recall spells, levitation, throwing weapons, and so on. You will need to have purchased a copy of Morrowind in order to be able to play Skywind, so you might as well pick it up now when it's at such a steep discount. The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion is also on sale for just a bit under €4. This is my favorite Elder Scrolls in terms of the story and writing. I love the faction quests and side quests especially, and I also think the voice acting is iconic. I personally prefer this over the remaster. I prefer the older visuals. I don't mind the level scaling because I never reach a super high level. I don't min-max, I don't grind skill levels, and I most certainly don't complete every single quest on a single character. I actually roleplay, so at most I may reach something like level 25 or maximum level 30 by the time I'm finished with that character. Even so, if you're bothered by the level scaling, there's plenty of mods for Oblivion that fix that, and you don't have to pay a much larger amount of money to get the remaster if that's all you're getting it for. If the visuals of the old Oblivion bother you, and perhaps you find it a bit too buggy for your liking, plus the level scaling annoys you and you don't want to install mods, then of course, the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion Remastered is also available for €38.50, or the deluxe edition is €45.50. It's just 30% off from the original price for now, since it did come out earlier this year. It's fine enough for a remaster. I personally don't get the hype, because the original is still very much playable without any mods. I always played vanilla and have a great time with it. I also hate the remaster for the fact that it changed some of the original voice lines with new ones that simply aren't as good. For example, the Cliff Racer song done by Craig Seckler, who voices pretty much all the male elves in Oblivion, was replaced randomly with a very shitty voice line for no reason, even though the Cliff Racer song is a very iconic, recognizable meme from Oblivion. But anyway, if you for any reason would enjoy the remaster more, it is on a discount, albeit a fairly small one. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is of course on sale as well. The special edition is €10. If you have the special edition and want the anniversary upgrade for it, that's also €10. If you don't have any version, then the anniversary edition is €16.50. Personally, I just have the special edition. I didn't see any reason to bother with the anniversary one. I doubt that there's many people who haven't yet played Skyrim, but maybe you've only played it on a console and want to get it for PC, then it's at a very nice price. This isn't my favorite Elder Scrolls game. I do enjoy playing a few hours of it here and there, but I think the main story is very boring, so I only ever explore and do faction or side quests. There's going to be Sky Oblivion and Skywind, fan recreations of Oblivion and Morrowind respectively within the engine of Skyrim, so even if you don't like Skyrim that much, you may still want to get the special edition so that you can play these free fan remakes of the older and better Elder Scrolls games. Sky Oblivion should definitely release this year, unsure about Skywind, but it should also come fairly soon. Certainly way before the Elder Scrolls 6. Esoteric Ebb is on sale for €20. This is a D&D-based disco-like, so a fantasy narrative CRPG that follows the cleric as he figures out a conspiracy in his city after he wakes up from what could have been an assassination attempt. It's mainly developed by one guy, Christopher Bodegard. He did of course get help from various people who did all sorts of things, but it is mainly his baby that he worked on for many, many years, and it is an amazing RPG. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite games, and in many ways I enjoy it more than Disco Elysium, especially in terms of the writing. I feel like it's far more focused, easier to go through, the story has better pacing. It may also just be that I really enjoy fantasy stories more than any other genre, so that's why I like this more than Disco Elysium. But even if you like Disco more than this, Esoteric Ebb is still an amazing narrative CRPG that you should absolutely play if you like this genre. Fable: The Lost Chapters is on sale for €3. This is my favorite Fable game. I unfortunately couldn't play Fable 2 because I never had an Xbox that could play it, and it was an Xbox exclusive, but even so I think I would have still preferred the first Fable. I've been playing it ever since I was a little kid. My cousins introduced me to it and gave me a copy all the way back then, and I've been playing it pretty much every year, at least a little bit ever since. It's a great fantasy RPG with choice and consequence, full of British humor, doesn't take itself too seriously. It's got very interesting systems, such as a day and night cycle with NPCs actually following schedules, shops opening and closing, and NPCs going to sleep. You can buy houses and rent them out or use them for yourself. You can marry NPCs, even guys, and your hero is a man. And remember, this came out in the early 2000s, so that's pretty big. You can do all sorts of fun stuff. Your hero's appearance can change based on doing good or evil actions. You can become an angelic-looking hero with a halo or an extremely evil-looking one with horns, red eyes, and smoke swirling around you. Very cool, especially for how old the game is. The main story is also really good. I always enjoy going through it. Fable Anniversary is also on sale for €10.50. I personally recommend the original. This time, it's not for any changes the remaster makes over the original. Unfortunately, the Anniversary Edition has certain visual effects that can't be turned off, and which make me extremely motion sick, so I am simply unable to play it because of that. The gameplay is pretty much the same, though I think the armor system may have been simplified if I'm not mistaken. I don't think the graphics of the Anniversary Edition are that much better than the original, and Fable TLC is still very much playable even today. So up to you which version you prefer. I highly recommend looking at some gameplay footage of the Anniversary Edition to see if it makes you motion sick, or if you buy it, try it out immediately, and if it gives you vertigo or motion sickness, then refund it. I got stuck with it because I didn't play it immediately and I had no idea I would have such a bad time. I'm not just mentioning Fable because it's one of my favorite games, but also because the new Fable game, which is a little bit of a reboot, will be coming out in February 2027. It was supposed to come out in autumn 2026, but they pushed it forward because of GTA 6. Ugh. The new Fable game looks amazing, with pretty much everything I wanted, including demon doors. The only thing that isn't there is this good versus evil system with the heroes changing appearance, but there is a reputation system that very much affects the way NPCs perceive you and interact with you, so I personally don't mind that the angel and demon appearances aren't a thing anymore. I'm absolutely buying and playing Fable immediately when it comes out. It seems like the devs are actual fans of the original and understand what made it so good. So yeah, if you're interested in the upcoming Fable game and would like to see the best original inspiration out of the 3 Fable games, I 100% recommend buying either Fable The Lost Chapters or Fable Anniversary. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is at a super nice discount, available for €24, which is really good. It's an amazing historical open-world RPG with deep systems for combat, equipment, and skills. The story is pretty good, but a bit too linear for my liking, and some of the side quests aren't the best. You may come across an issue that other players, myself included, have experienced, which is that you'll get stuck in the first region of the game and get burned out trying to complete everything there. It's very much like the Hinterlands problem from Dragon Age Inquisition, where there's a large area filled with content, but a lot of the content is not that good, but the player still feels compelled to complete everything and explore the entire area before moving on with the main story. I do urge you to mostly focus on the main story and only do a few side quests. Most of the side quests aren't that interesting anyway and require a lot of going back and forth. The city of Kudenberg and that entire area is way nicer from what I've heard. I still haven't gotten back to the game because I got burnt out on it in the first area. Still, even with only having experienced that part of KCD2, it's an amazing open world RPG and it's very fun to play. And for such a low price of €24, it's absolutely worth it if you enjoy this kind of game. Obviously, if you're not into the historical aspect, then you may want to skip it. Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning is available for €10, which is insane for how much content there is in this game. It was originally meant to be an MMO, but it got turned into a single-player RPG. But despite the issues during development, it ended up being a great game. It's one of my favorites that I like to replay every now and then. It has a huge map, which may be daunting, but honestly it's fine even if you only play through some of the content, because the quests are interesting, the world building is really cool, and the gameplay is very fun. Good voice acting too, and I like the visual style, which is similar to World of Warcraft. The remaster didn't change much about the graphics, but I do think it's a very pretty game, whether you have the original or the remaster. I don't believe the original is available to buy anywhere anymore, so you'll have to buy the remaster, but it's quite frequently on sale. I would absolutely nab it when it's at a huge discount like this though, since that may not always be the case. I love the factions in this game, particularly the House of Ballads, who are these immortal fae who recreate old ballads or legends of heroes from the past. The premise of the game is very cool. You were killed and then got resurrected by something called the Well of Souls. Having been reborn after dying, you were severed from the system of fate that everyone else is affected by. So you're free to make your own fate, and obviously because of this you're the main character who can stop the main evil guys, but more importantly, you get a really cool class and combat system where you can combine abilities from warrior, mage, and rogue and choose a particular class that has certain bonuses. You can of course also play a pure class, that's also an option, but I love the freedom in creating your own playstyle in Kingdoms of Amalur. The combat feels very nice and fluid, as well the animations are top-notch, there's quite a wide variety of enemies, all with their own attacks and visual designs. It's just a very well-made game, and it's kind of a shame that it's one of those RPGs that goes under the radar for a lot of people. Maybe because it looks so much like an MMO. If you haven't played it before, I really very much recommend it. It's a lot of fun. The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante is on sale for €8. This one is also more of a niche game, but this time because it's a text-based RPG. Still, in that niche, it's fairly well known. It has amazing world building and writing, a really cool visual style in this book format that the game has. It's the best when you play it blind for the first time and make choices for role-playing reasons. However, if you want to be able to experience all the different endings, you will probably have to use a guide, because the choices and consequences are unfortunately a bit too mathematical in nature. So you probably can't just make the logical choices you think would lead to a certain outcome, because your character needs a certain skill level, as well as a certain amount of willpower or resolve or whatever that resource was called, to be able to endure certain negative consequences during the story, or more or less force certain situations when his skills are lacking. It's a weird system, which I think makes the game far less enjoyable on repeat playthroughs. If the choices weren't so math-based, this would be one of my favorite RPGs, but as it stands, the first playthrough was amazing, and then I got annoyed at the fact that I needed to look up guides that said choose A, then D, then C, and so on. However, I am mentioning Sir Brante because on the 20th of July this year, just a little less than a month from now, the developers are finally releasing the sequel called The Life and Suffering of Prince Jerian. I am expecting the sequel to be a lot better in terms of the choice and consequence system. I'm not 100% sure, of course, but I would imagine plenty of people must have complained about it in their reviews and feedback about the first game. I backed Prince Jerian on Kickstarter, so I'll be getting a key when the game comes out, and will likely review it if it ends up being worth talking about. Even if the first game has this downside, I still think it's a worthwhile narrative experience, and I would recommend buying it if you're interested in playing Prince Jerian when it comes out. You will understand a lot more about the setting, the history, some of the characters, and so on. It's probably not necessary to have played the first game, but with this kind of text-based RPG that is super focused on the world and the story, it will probably feel better to have at least watched a playthrough of Sir Brante, if nothing else. The Outer Worlds 2 is on sale for €35. This is one of my all-time favorite RPGs because it's super well written, the main story is actually compelling, and of course has plenty of choice and consequence. The gameplay is very fun as well, and you can absolutely build very different characters who go through the game in very different ways, as it should be in any good RPG. It's a funny and a satirical way sci-fi game set in a future where corporations control everything in the colonies that humanity has in outer space. I liked the first game, but it was fairly limited and it didn't feel that fun to replay. In contrast, TOE 2 is just way better in every single way. I know that Obsidian Entertainment has maybe gotten a bit of a bad reputation due to Avowed, so that may have been why some players didn't bother giving The Outer Worlds 2 a chance, but you have to understand it's quite different teams working on these games. Avowed to me was always going to be very hit or miss because it's set in the world of the Pillars of Eternity games, and I personally never liked the style of writing in those games. The characters were not likable, and honestly were quite annoying. The dialogue and narration is full of exposition that expects you to understand what it's talking about by reading through the glossary or watching lore explanation guides on YouTube, and to me that's just not good writing. Avowed has exactly the same problems when it comes to its writing as Pillars of Eternity does, at least in my opinion. The Outer Worlds 2, however, is an entirely different beast, and to me it feels like that good Obsidian-style RPG, both in terms of story and gameplay. You don't have to play the first game to understand or enjoy this one, and I personally don't recommend The Outer Worlds 1. TOE 2 is just superior in every way, so just play this one if you think you may enjoy it. Maybe this kind of RPG is for players like me who are older or who at least prefer older gameplay design. Maybe the reason why TOE 2 hasn't resonated with as many people is because this type of gameplay feels outdated to modern players. I don't know. I personally am very happy that this game exists because I haven't gotten to play any good action RPGs with a story that has this kind of important choice and consequence design pillar in a long, long time. Probably since Dragon Age Inquisition. Pentiment is available for just €10. This is an adventure game with RPG elements set in 15th century Bavaria, so the early modern period, and it's a wonderful little historical RPG. It's extremely well written, it has choice and consequence of course, seeing as it's another Obsidian game. It has some pacing issues in the third act. The final act is a bit too long and weirdly linear compared to the other two, so it may not feel as great to play that part. Still, it feels very rewarding to finish the game and get to see all the fates of the characters you interacted with in the big family trees mural at the end. It may be a historical game and a text-heavy one, but it's one of my all-time favorite games and one of the very few games I've 100%ed because I just love it that much. This is a niche game due to the setting and also the style of gameplay. It's inspired by Disco Elysium and Night in the Woods, and has just a few backgrounds and skills that the player character has. Otherwise, most of the outcomes of your persuasion checks come from your choices in your interactions with the NPCs. It has a good murder mystery that kind of remains a little bit vague while still giving you a satisfying explanation at the end. It's certainly not a classic murder mystery, but I really like the fact that the answers aren't as clear-cut, especially in the period that it's set in, since obviously there wasn't very much in terms of clear evidence that could be extracted from crime scenes. If you like games like Disco Elysium, Night in the Woods, Esoteric Ebb, and so on, I do think you'll like Pentiment too. So do give it a shot if you're looking for a nice little adventure RPG with a bit of a different feel to it than all these other games. Finally, Risen is on sale for a bit under €4. It's an RPG made by Piranha Bytes in that Gothic style, and my personal favorite of theirs that I could actually play because the controls were finally decent enough and not too janky. Gothic 1 and 2 were just a bit too much for me, as I've explained previously. I've made a review of Risen a couple of years ago if you're interested in checking that out, but in general, if you enjoy the Gothic games or Gothic-like RPGs with difficult progression in the early game, then you'll probably like Risen. I also thought the visuals of this one were pretty cool, even though it's an older game. It just has a certain charm to it that I really enjoyed. The main story is strongest in the first half and kind of falls a bit apart in the second half because they ran out of time to flesh it out, but even just for that first half of the game, it's definitely worth the price. These have been my personal recommendations. There are a lot more games that aren't RPGs that I would have highlighted, but this video is already getting long, and I figured that since this channel has mainly been focused on RPGs, this would be the genre to focus on in my highlight. I'll mention some of my other favorite games on sale that aren't RPGs in a quick lightning round here. Thief Deadly Shadows for under €2, Dishonored 1 for €2, and Dishonored 2 for €6, Against the Storm for €9, Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era for €30, 2 Point Hospital and 2 Point Campus for €4.50 each, 2 Point Museum for just a bit over €20, and Civilization 6 for €6, though I would recommend getting the DLCs for it as well. I hope you enjoyed my highlight of the Steam Summer Sale in terms of RPGs and narrative games. Remember that for some games, especially older ones, it may be better to buy them on GOG if you use that platform because they have that preservation program which makes older games be playable on newer computers and operating systems without you having to do much of anything. A special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much. Thank you for sticking with me during this difficult period of burnout. I'm recovering from it, but it's a slow process. If you want to support me, subscribing and becoming a member are the most helpful, but of course only if you want to and can afford it. I always appreciate it, even if you just like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a kind comment. This has been B Tier Mutineer. I wish you a happy rest of your day or evening. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.